UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military projects, false flag alien invasion, PSYOP, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join the discussion now on UAP Crossfire.
Well, good evening and welcome to UAP Crossfire. I'm Dan Carlson, joined by Chris DePerno. Commander Cobra is off some remote corner of the world saving freedom. And we also are sad to report that Don Ecker is engaged with the toilet at the moment. Food poisoning, I believe, is the cause. And he cannot be with us tonight. So, Chris, it's you and me holding down the fort. I'm good. I'm a little colder than you are. You're in Florida, as I understand.
Well, I just got up to North Carolina. I was in Florida. The weather was beautiful. I begged my wife to move down there, and she absolutely says, get your ass back up here to Buffalo, New York.
And congratulations are in order. You had a mile marker anniversary this week, did you not?
Yeah. The 14th, I had one. It was 31 years of marriage.
31.
And I talked to some single people, and they said, you need to get married because you need to be as miserable as the rest of us.
Well, that's great. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Well, there's been a lot going on in the last week, and we want to touch on the hearings that took place on the 13th up on Capitol Hill. What's your general impression?
A nothing burger. I mean, if we look at the history of ufology and look at what we've done, Padre, you got to look at this and say, look, they're telling us stuff we already know. They're just making it a little more exciting. And they're good. They're good at putting out information that we think this is something new and exciting, but it's not that we haven't seen anybody come forward and say, I've been in the craft, except for Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar is the only one who said, I worked on the craft. I've been in the craft. This is how it works. Here's the sketch of it. Here's what it does. And then he took people out to actually witness the craft. And to make his credibility more, things that he said 20 years ago are now coming true.
Interesting. I do not know much about Mr. Lazar. I mean, I've seen some of his video clips on the internet, but I also know that we had some different people testifying this time. Mr. Lou Elizondo was there, and he made a remarkable statement that at least I thought. He was directly asked if the United States had a program to reverse engineer craft that were not of human origin. And his response was yes. What do you make of that?
But we know that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know they've been reverse engineering stuff because I'm going to go back to Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar was the one reverse engineering that. Okay. And they called him a nut, a crackpot, doesn't know what he's talking about. They harped on him. They sent the FBI after him and everything. But what Lou Elizondo is saying, and everybody's excited about it, we heard 20 years ago from people like Bob Lazar and I'm getting a blank on the newscaster or the reporter.
Oh, George Knapp?
George Knapp.
Okay.
How could I ever forget that name? Anyways, George Knapp reported on this. And here's the remarkable thing about that, Padre, is that not only did he report on this, describe it, but as I said, he took people out there and he says, on this date, on this time, you're going to watch the craft do a testing. And people actually confirmed that. And then the next thing you know, Bob Lazar never went to college. He never worked for the military or the government. But then you could see where they changed in their stories because he's got pay slips from naval intelligence. People went to look into if he was real or not. Got chastised, got screamed. James Goodall, for instance, He has a top secret clearance and went to go investigate Bob Lazar. And some admiral, he went in some admiral's office, and he got chewed out like there was no tomorrow and said, "Don't you ever bring that subject up again. Don't you ever do it." He had a copy of the pay stub. The guy shredded it and told him, "Get the hell out of my office. Don't ever come back with this."
So why is he still walking around a free man? I mean, you hear testimony from people that say, death threats or hit teams for those who stray out of their what do they call that agreement, non-disclosure agreements. How come Mr. Lazar hasn't disappeared?
Because they would make him credible. It would be so much easier to say, Padre, this guy's a nutcase. Don't pay any attention to him, and destroy his credibility by destroying his history, his past. Once if they lock him up, like you said, and that's a great question. Once they lock him up, then people are going to say, "Wow, he's credible." People, look what they did. Remember, David Grush said they have destroyed people's lives and they've killed people over this secret.
Yes.
So, I mean, that should have been. Everybody should have stopped right there and said, "What do you know about the homicides and the murder?" Because that's how you're going to get this actual UAP ufology thing opened up. Because once you find out about the murders of people with that, then they're going to say, "Well, why was he murdered?" "Well, he was holding this secret." "Well, what did he do?" You got to sometimes in a case like this, and I'm putting my detective hat on, you got to work backwards, and say, okay, let's start with something that what was said that we can break the outer layer and then try to force that. Because remember, homicides have no limits on them. They can be prosecuted to this day. So let's say somebody was murdered on this and it gets investigated. That's where the cracks start coming out, because people that say, I don't want to go to jail for murder.
Well, let me ask you this. For those who might be listening or watching who may not be familiar with your background, you're a former military, correct?
Yep.
And
yes.
What branch and capacity did you serve, sir?
Well, I served in two different things. I was a United States Marine, and I had a top secret clearance. I was a Marine security guard. I was part of an ambassador's bodyguard force, and I was on a part of what they call the internal defense team. And then after my time there, I joined the National Guard and became an intelligence sergeant, majoring in nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare. I used to give briefings in the battlefield to battalion commanders on what the Russians might use. That might, but you know what? That might come up for me. I might get a job the way things are going in the world.
Yeah.
But I used to brief battalion commanders on meteorology and, hey, if they use gas, this is probably what they're going to use. This is how it works. The wind direction is this way. The longevity of the stuff is. So I kind of got an idea of how the intelligence fields work. I remember when I worked as a U.S. Marine in embassies, I worked with the CIA. I worked with DOD people. So, I mean, I didn't share their secrets, but I knew how they operated. I knew how close-knit that they worked on things that, they want to keep quiet. And they're very close-mouthed, a lot of those guys.
Well, with Veterans Day just passed, I'll just take a moment. Thank you for your service to our country, sir. We appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. But the ones that never made it home are the ones that should really be thanked, because they gave it all.
Indeed. Now, from there, you went into law enforcement and worked your way up to detective. Tell us a bit about your career there.
Well, yeah, I was a major crimes detective. I worked on just about everything. I did children's crimes, children murders, major crimes, murders, stabbing, shootings, this and that. And I realized, and I then was assigned to the chief and district attorney's office working on very sensitive cases. And the thing that I always remembered from my past is that when you want to get information like this, you can't sometimes go directly at it, because you'll never get it. It's too well guarded, too well secret. What you got to do is you got to find something that you can, I call a crack in the armor, that you can hold and say, okay, we're going to investigate this, even though it's not directly what you wanted. It's involved, so you could spread it, and eventually it takes you right to that path where you want to go. So when David Grush said, hey, people have been injured, people have been murdered over this, right then and there, he should have been taken right out of there and interrogated and said, who was murdered? Who was injured? We want to talk to them now. Because there's no statute of limitations on murder.
Right. And where was it that you served as a detective?
Syracuse Police Department. I was a detective there.
In New York.
Yeah.
I've got to ask, in the many years you did that, did you ever come across a case where UAP or paranormal was involved?
Oh, yeah. We used to have people calling up saying, I got a UFO in my backyard. I got this, I got that. I mean, here's the thing, Padre. Before I actually started studying UAPs, I was an absolute skeptic. I didn't believe in any of this. I was like, you go to these people's house, and I couldn't figure out why are they frightened? There's nothing in your backyard. Well, it was in your backyard. Or I saw an alien coming through my bedroom. Whoa. Yeah, I don't see anything here now. I checked the closet, checked the drawers, nothing here. See you later, kind of a deal. And that's, years ago, that's how police work would handle those type of cases. There wouldn't be no report on it. You wouldn't take it seriously. Nowadays, it's starting to turn because police officers are having sightings out in the middle of the night. Police officers say, hey, wait a minute. That lady 2 months ago that reported something, well, guess what? I saw the same thing last night on the midnight shift. Mm-hmm. So you're starting to get cops who are saying to themselves, there might be something to this. And police watch the news and watch these hearings too. Mm-hmm. And they're saying to themselves, there's something that they're, because their sixth sense will come in. And I've talked to cops. They go, Chris, there's something they're hiding. Mm-hmm. There is something, maybe a special access program that they don't want anybody to know. Maybe there's, for all I know, a treaty or an agreement with aliens. Because remember, a lot of people who were in high placed positions, Israelis, Canadians, and stuff, and these were government people, have come out and said, hey, they're walking among us. That's a very frightening thing. You know what I mean?
It is. And, with some people testifying to shape-shifting aliens, as we'll get to here in a little bit as part of that hearing, it's possible. And coming from my background, from that of a pastor and student of the Bible, there's passages in there where it says that you may entertain angels unaware, meaning there are these supernatural beings who are walking around in our society, and be on your best hospitality, because you may find yourself in a position to help them someday. And that's something that I think is, at least for those who are faithful, that's something that is readily accepted. Now, in your career as a detective, did you ever have, I should have been more specific, an abduction case or a murder case that might have been related to UAP or paranormal?
Not a murder case. We've had people reported that they've been abducted by aliens. I mean, but they're there. There's nothing. You got to remember now, as police officers back in those days, and I still don't think they did, because I taught at academies and I've never seen a scheduled class on how to handle UAPs. Mm-hmm. So, very smart guys I worked with, but they're walking into something they have no, some of them would say, what's a UFO? What's a UAP? Never heard of it. I have no idea what it is. So they have to be educated now. And that's a departmental thing. Someone will say, no, we're not going to, we got too much murders, robberies, rapes going on that we got to worry about aliens. But some departments are looking to say, okay, what's going on? Because remember, years ago, Padre, and you know this, that if you said I was abducted by aliens, they would start looking you under the mental health law.
Yeah.
They would say, well, maybe we need to have you check into a doctor. Come on with me. We'll take you to CPAP and maybe have a couple of doctors take a look at you and see what's going on. And those doctors would be psychiatrists.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not something that cops are, and to this day, I can guarantee you, if I said, hey, in a classroom, how many of you guys have been trained in UFOs? They'd probably laughing at me and say, get this guy off the stage. You know, and because it's just not something that is taught. But here's the other part, Padre. It's something that maybe they don't want to teach.
Mm. You know, I hear about departments that will employ psychics to help find a missing
Yes.
person. Are we going to, in your opinion, be coming to a point, or are we there already, for some departments will consult with someone, you know, like MUFON or somebody who's a UFO investigator in the area of some credibility to assist them in solving something like that?
That is the dirty little secret that police departments have done in the past. And I know this for a fact because I worked with a psychic to find a police officer that was that. I'll give you this story.
Mhm.
So we have a good friend of mine went to go rescue two people who were climbing in the gorge and they got stuck. And as he was trying to rescue them, he fell into the gorge and got swept away with the water.
Oh.
So we tried to find his body. We first were trying to do a rescue. We knew after 24 hours this was now a recovery situation. We sent divers in, everything. We couldn't find him. Somebody said, well, why don't we call a gentleman by the name of Phil Jordan? Now, Phil Jordan is a very well-renowned psychic. He has found missing people, and he was actually near where this took place, so he wasn't that far away. So they actually called Phil Jordan, and Phil Jordan came down, and he said, I'd like to walk the trail. And he goes, okay. So he walks the trail all the way down, and I'm following him. And like I said, I was a skeptic. I go, this is really a waste of time. And he doesn't say anything. He looks at a couple of pools, and he just stares at him, but he doesn't say anything. And he walks back up the trail. And I'm like, okay, I got my exercise for the day. So what do you got, Phil? And he goes, here's what I see. I see that there's a ring of flowers hovering over him. And where that ring of flowers is, that's where he's at. And I'm like, Phil, he's in the water. I mean, if we were looking in the woods or something, yeah, that'd be different. He's in the water. Well, here's the amazing part about this. So we have a ceremony. We go to the bridge, and Billy loved Irish whiskey. So we dump a bottle of Irish whiskey, pour it into the creek for him. And when you know, we throw a ring of flowers into the creek.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. You know where I'm going with this, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Continue.
So a fireman, it was actually a fireman who was walking back or walking toward there, stopped at a still pool. Now, you're talking about very rushing water, but in this one pool, the water was still, and that's where the reef was. And the fireman said, I remember what Phil Jordan said, called everybody and said, hey, well, you know, what do we got to lose? Send a diver down. So underneath the water, there was an underground ledge, and Bill's body was found there.
Oh.
Right above those flowers.
Wow.
Now, the continuation of this story, and this is what made me a believer. So I had to go down and recover Bill's body because we needed people who know how to rappel down the side of a gorge to get down there. So we went down, we got him, and I had given my wallet to somebody, but I forgot who I gave my wallet to. And in my wallet was my badge. And I couldn't go down there and, you know, and get my wallet soaked. Because, I mean, obviously we're going right into the river. So I come up and I go, hey, you know, who's got my wallet? Who's got my wallet? And nobody's answering. But here's the thing. Somebody goes, well, go ask Phil Jordan where your wallet is. So I did. I mean, okay. I say, hey, Phil, where's my wallet? And he looks at me and he goes, you'll get it tonight. I go, Phil, wait a minute. Don't go away. Where's my wallet? I'd like to have it now. He goes, you'll get it tonight. Relax. I go, no, I'm not relaxed. I need that wallet. He says, and he was now short and curt with me. And actually, we became friends later on and stuff. He's a good friend of a classmate of mine and stuff. And he looks at me and he goes, listen, tonight some short little guy is going to come up to you with a mustache and hand you your wallet.
Oh, boy.
All right. So I get ready for work. I got to work the midnight shift. And I get a call from home, and it's a detective say, hey, I got your wallet. Now, this guy does not match that description. He's tall, he's blonde hair, he has no mustache. So I say, buddy, just hold on to the wallet there, and I'll be right in to get it. So I drive in. I go, where's Buddy? He's got my wallet. Oh, Buddy had to go home. Well, does anybody know where my wallet is? No. So I get ready for roll call. I figure, well, Buddy will tell me where he put his wallet, probably locked in his desk. So I go out on the road, and I get a call from the sergeant. The sergeant says, hey, I forgot to tell you at roll call, there's a wallet, your wallet. I says, hey, Sarge, do me a favor. Don't give it to anybody. Would you give it to me directly? Yeah, sure. Where are you? I'm on the Commons. So he drives. I kid you not, and I'll show you. He drives this way. I'm driving this way. And he stops, and I stop. And some guy comes out of nowhere, and he's talking to the sergeant, another police officer. And the sergeant drives away. And here's this guy walking up who's short, has a mustache, and hands me my wallet.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
And that was a police officer who was short with a wallet?
Yeah. It was one of the guys I was working with. Okay. And so even if I tried to make Phil a liar, I couldn't do it.
Oh, brother. That's amazing.
So that turned me on and said, hey, there's got to be something to this. But they won't tell you. But police departments use hypnotists. They have used psychics. When they have a case that they go, listen, we're just dumbfounded. We don't have any evidence or anything like that. You know, once in a while, you won't ever hear about it, but they do. Will say, hey, let's get a hypnotist in here. Let's get a psychic in here just to see if we can give this a shot. And sometimes they've been right on the money. On the money.
Have you ever heard of them bringing in somebody who's a UAP investigator to explore a case?
No, I have not. But like I said, the police officers have seen UAPs, and some of them actually believe in it. And they're more kindful, and they're more patient with people now that have said that they've seen these things and stuff. That wasn't in the vocabulary before. You go, lady, listen, I don't have time for this, and you leave. But now they go, well, tell me about it. Tell me about what's happening. And there's always something, to these stories that makes you walk out and go, geez, I mean, she's too specific on stuff. She's got this information. How would we know that unless it was true?
Yeah.
Kind of a deal. And she's looking you straight in the eye. She's not looking away. She's not covering her mouth. All the body language that would tell you, she's being deceitful. There's none to that. One of the things that, I remember was, and I did this with a person who actually reported a UFO. I wanted to get them angry because a person who's telling the truth will get angry very fast, and they won't calm down. A person who's lying will get angry very fast and calm down very fast. So, I mean, you could tell, say, wait a minute, he's jumping on me, but he's backing off real fast. Where a person's telling the truth, they get hot and they stay hot because this is something to them is a trauma. And that's what we have to look at this. This is a trauma. And so you have to say that, hey, wait a minute, there's something happened with this person.
So, as a former law enforcement officer, if someone had a close encounter in which they had been injured or violated, would you counsel them to or not to call law enforcement?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't counsel them at all. If they were injured, I would persuade them to go to a doctor, and
Okay,
then let them tell the doctor, and then the doctor could tell me by the wounds what caused it.
I see.
That I mean, because now I'm making assumptions without evidence. So I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that I have an open mind to everything. I could say, "Oh yeah, she banged a bottle on her head and broke the bottle and it cut her stuff, and she's bleeding all over." I'd rather say, "Dear, we got to get you to the hospital.
Mhm.
Let a doctor or physician talk to you." Then, as during the course of my investigation, I would say, "Doctor, what did it? Oh, I pulled glass out of her head. Okay, it was a bottle. Or I don't understand how she got this wound."
Hmm.
So then you kind of say to yourself, "Wow." Now, Don Ecker has actually had a case of a mutilated body that they could not understand how it happened, and there are reports of mutilated bodies that people say this doesn't make sense. How did this happen? And why is the blood drained? Why is there certain organs gone? Why is there certain things? And nobody wants to say, well, this is related to cattle mutilations. I mean, can you imagine trying to go into court and try to convince a jury that this was a alien abduction and murder? I mean, they'd laugh you right out. Let's be honest about it.
I live in a fairly remote area of the American West. Many ranchers out here. It's not unusual to have ranches 10, 20, 30,000 acres with
Sure.
cows on them. And cattle mutilations happen. But if you understand a rancher's mentality, unless it's something that is happening to many cattle at the same time, if he goes out and he sees one cow drained of blood, weird cuts on it, three S's, shoot, shovel, shut up, and that just not going to be reported, not going to be talked to. And I think that some of these things that are happening in remote areas probably happen more often than we recognize. But this is the first I've heard, Don, that you're intimating that these types of injuries have been found on people.
Yeah. I personally have not had one of those cases. I know Don Ackert has, and we've talked extensively about it. Don has talked to me extensively about it. That there's always evidence. You have to find the evidence. But let's take and we can relate it to a human mutilation, a cattle mutilation. Like the first thing I want to do is see if there's any trace, radiation. Is there any type of EMF? Now, on a homicide, a regular homicide, you wouldn't have EMF radiation. You wouldn't have ionized radiation traces of that. Why would there be? A guy got shot or stabbed or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But in these cattle mutilations, you do have traces of that. Here's the big thing. So how does a cow make such an indentation in the ground unless they were dropped at a tremendously high height?
Yeah.
Which a lot of them do. So when a body hits, you're standing there, you get shot, you fall, you're not going to make an indentation. I mean, you might break the grass and stuff like that. You might form stuff, but the ground isn't going to be lowered where you have that with cattle mutilation. So there's three things right there. Now, here's the other thing. Why does certain parts of the animal disappear?
Mm-hmm.
Eyeballs, tongue, the anus, the intestines.
Mm-hmm.
Now we always talk about, oh, they drained it with blood. Okay, but there's people who will say, well, that's just blood that coagulates and seeps into the ground and stuff like that, which could happen. But to have certain organs taken out with precision. See, that's the thing. That's what rules out another animal, eating it, is because, everybody has those carnivore teeth that you could chew and tear flesh. But when you have precision that people say, and veterinarians say, I've never seen this before. I've never witnessed a cut like this before, or this is something we can't do. Now, bing, 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 that puts you in a whole different category, because now you've got an expert saying this is not possible in our technology.
Speaking of which, as we move the conversation back now toward the hearings and UAPs, I want to talk about some technologies that were revealed in the operation, or what was it, Immaculate Constellation. And,
Immaculate Constellation,
yeah. And being a pastor, forgive me if I actually accidentally slip up on that.
Padre, that's fine. I mean, you know what, Padre? Let me just put this out to the public right now so people understand. I truly believe, as you do, there's a spiritual component to this. There is. I'm totally convinced there's an absolute spiritual component to this thing. What it is, I don't know yet.
Right.
But there is a spiritual component to this.
I wholeheartedly agree. A term that I was not familiar with that came up was TUO, Technologies of Unknown Origin. And so there was reference within this whistleblower document to, of course, UAP, Unidentified Anomalous Phenomenon, NHI, Non-Human Intelligence. And then we have Technologies of Unknown Origin, or TUO, which ostensibly are the things that are recovered from crashed UAP, and we don't know what it is. And, that can sound alarming or spooky, but let's face it, if we were 120 years ago on the wide open plains of Western America, and Native American picked up a D-cell battery, it would be a technology of unknown origin. Wouldn't know what it was or what it did. Just something interesting there. So supposedly we have possessions of, if not entire craft, pieces of craft. We have samples of their technology, and then evidence of non-human intelligence. Now, NHI has really crept forward into these conversations as opposed to alien. Why do you think that is, Chris?
I'm not sure if this is a disinformation campaign, because they've always said the military's technology is 100 years more advanced than what we know. So we have to take that into account. And now we're saying non-human intelligence. Well, what does that actually mean? I mean, here's the thing. They say, well, we're exploring or looking at non-human intelligence. But nobody can put their finger on it. Nobody can say, hey, we're looking at, psychic ability. We're looking at frequencies. We're looking at this. This is what we found with non-human intelligence. They give you a plain soup, and they don't put anything in the soup that you can eat on, and that's ridiculous. And that's just a form of disinformation. I'm going to give you this, but you're not going to know what's in there, because we're not telling you. And this is the amazing part, is that Grush, Neil, all these guys who are absolutely probably telling the truth are not having the access to the actual bodies or crafts or the reverse engineering. They are always, well, I talked to this guy, or I saw a document, or somebody told me about a document, or this guy is the one that does. But you never hear the guy's name. I like one of them to stand up. John Smith told me that he was in there with the bodies. Okay, let's go get John Smith and subpoena him and bring him in here. Not going to happen. Look at Lou Elizondo. Lou Elizondo, people say he's the foremost authority on ufology. He's done with these super secret programs. He's written a book and everything now. At the hearings, what did he say? Well, I can't tell you that. We have to go in a skiff. I can't tell you that. We have to go in a skiff. why bother have a public hearing if these guys that's all they're going to say? Let's just, cut that out, go into the skiff, and then whatever you can tell us, save ourselves some time and energy. I mean, he keeps referring to national security in this. Why bother being there? I mean, that's my take on the nothing burger of the hearings at times.
And of course, when we talk about non-human intelligence, it is so vague. I mean, you could take a dolphin that's trained to do tricks for fish. There's a level of intelligence that's there. And we talk about them being an intelligent animal. A dog that's trained to do specific tasks. There's a level of intelligence there, but it's not the same as a human intelligence. And there's a tendency for us to anthropomorphize everything and equate equivalent across the aisle from human to non-human, when it could be something as simple as an animal that seems to like to eat at the same time every day.
Here's two amazing things that fall in the category of non-human intelligence that I just came back from a homicide conference down in Florida with the National Homicide Investigators Conference. And there's two things that struck me amazing. One, what is considered that we all know about that's non-human intelligence? Well, AI.
Yeah.
AI, I was sitting there talking to engineers and scientists and physicists and everything else who are telling me amazing things what they're doing with AI now. I mean, they know that AI can even lie. They showed me that AI, if you put it on a certain path, will learn how to lie. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I was so intrigued with this because they want to introduce AI to the police world in certain aspects. But here's the other thing that's non-human intelligence. I actually was looking at an otter, the animal, the otter. Mm-hmm. And so this is non-human intelligence, but the otter was doing things that a human can't do. I mean, they send, and I know this is hard to believe, but I mean, it's actually true. They send an otter underwater to find dead bodies now, because an otter can smell underwater. They can have otters smell blood and stuff because a brick that was a murder weapon was in the water for 20 years, and the otter found it. So that's non-human intelligence, So think about, I'm just giving you the primitive stuff. Yeah. Think about what non-human intelligence could be with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's sobering to think about if it goes sideways. Personally, my experience as I research material for sermons and so forth in my church has not been impressive with the AI models, because I'll ask it a question, it'll give me an answer, and I know the answer is wrong. And so I tell it it's wrong. And then it apologizes to me and says I'm right. And then I can go back 2 weeks later and ask it the same question, and it's still wrong. I mean, it's now, honestly, 50% is where I am in being wrong with one of the models.
Padre, I never thought artificial intelligence could lie, but artificial intelligence lies. Now, if you can teach artificial intelligence to lie, be deceptive, or things like that, think about what we don't know, that what they've done with artificial intelligence. And that's non-human intelligence. So when they say non-human intelligence, are they working on a craft that doesn't have a being in it, but it has a consciousness? That the AI actually has a conscious thing? Because remember, I think it was Eric Davis, don't quote me on this, but there was a scientist who actually touched the craft, and he says there's a consciousness to this craft. It's almost like mind melting with him.
A conscious machine. In the sci-fi realm, we have seen integration of organic and robotic to create what they call, is cyborg the correct term there for something that's got some organic material?
Yeah, a cyborg, part organic.
Yeah,
or humanoid. Another term would be humanoid.
Right. We've seen that in sci-fi, But one thing that I've always been intrigued at, when I see the flight characteristics of some of these things and the tremendous G forces at work and how they can turn and accelerate so quickly, it just kind of reminds me of if you've ever watched fish in water close to shore or done any kind of snorkeling or scuba diving, how a fish can be going one way and then just flip and go that way, be going slowly this way and that way. It's a living organism in its environment capable of doing this sort of thing. And so the question that comes to me is, what is the possibility that some UAP could actually be living things?
That's a great point, Padre, because we're just starting to look at what drones and how to make drones and what we can do with drones, and we've advanced very much. So let's put that we can make a drone with a consciousness and be able to give it a mission and have it carry out that mission on its own way of doing it. And the intelligence is programmed in or given, and then it starts teaching itself. And that's one of the things AI does, is that you can give it information and then it starts teaching itself more and more. So when you say, hey, it could do these turns and everything, well, you're right. There's maybe not even a pilot in there. It may be flying on its own and wanting to do this because, this is the best way for it to go.
I was reading an article this week about some of the drones that are being used in Ukraine to attack Russian armor and so forth. And they are beginning to integrate this kind of technology that you're speaking about, where let's say they send out a group of 6 against a tank, let's say, and these drones are assigned the target, but they have some autonomy in ascertaining how to attack and destroy the target, even if it involves sacrificing 5 of the 6 so the 6th hits the target. And you start to look at that and say, that's kind of scary stuff.
We really don't know what the technology we have or our adversaries has. I read an article that the Chinese have been able to primitively, but started with invisibility. They were able to have screens or certain type of stuff that will mirror what's behind you, therefore project it into the front, and you wouldn't be seen. And so, you look at this technology, of course, it's not like a button you push and stuff, but there is a product that can do that. So now you look at that and now you say to yourself, okay, what do the Chinese have that we don't have? What do the Russians have that we don't have that's more advanced? Because, and the sad thing about it is, I truly believe we've conquered, gravity. I truly believe that we have stuff that can go fast, no fuel and stuff, but it's locked up in special access programs that we will never see because it's weaponized. And when it's weaponized, we don't want anybody else to have it.
It's interesting, your description of the craft that the Chinese supposedly are working on. My first novel, Species Unknown, available at Amazon.com.
That's a good plug. I like that.
Has a good portion of it involving craft used by a secret organization that have invisibility quality using the technology that you just described of projecting the background to the front. And I wrote that in 2018. So maybe I'm a little Tom Clancy-esque ahead of my time here, but it's kind of interesting.
I think you are, but I mean, I will tell you that, there's all kinds, I was able to talk to a guy that this was years ago, amazing guy. And the stuff that he was telling me was just unbelievable. He was telling me about S4. Now, to believe this guy, I had to really closely listen to him. I could not ask him very few questions, but what he was describing, he started with Area 51, and he was saying, well, Chris, Area 51 has this and has this, and he had actual pictures, and he said, see, that's where they keep the new technology of ammunition for the flight crews and stuff. That warehouse is over there. There's the range for the security officers. And I go, how would he know this? How would he know if this building does this certain thing? This building does this certain thing.
Mhm.
So my conclusion was, after he thoroughly showed me, all kinds of things, like, hey, this, that, he had to be in there. So he tells me that they actually have a device that they can walk into a room. They open a door, they walk in the room, and they open another door, and they're in Australia at Pine Gap.
What?
Yeah. So, the thing was that the guy is credible. I mean, I've never heard this before, but like he said, he was at S4, and he says you can go to a room, and they've conquered teleportation. Now, remember, they're just letting it out that colleges are able to take molecules and teleport them.
Right.
And then now we're developing what we call string theory, where a molecule over here will react even at great distances the same way as a molecule over here.
Well,
So,
this technology absolutely must come to the public. Think of the
it must, but it never will.
times that could be cut down. Think of the whole aircraft industry would be unnecessary.
Yeah.
Think of the pollutants we could save in the atmosphere with no more planes. You could just walk into your closet and end up where you go.
But not only that technology, they had all kinds of other technology that he was explaining about. Here's the interesting thing. We were talking about mutilations, and this is the most frightening thing. So when they had a living being at S4, this is what he was explaining to me. When they had a living being at S4, they had to bring in botanists. And I go, why would they bring in botanists? And I looked at him like, okay, this is, no. He says, this is why we had the cattle mutilations, because they don't have a digestive system like we do. They don't eat food or extricate like we do. Their system is different. They take protein, make it into a paste, and rub it on their skin. It's ingested that way. And the same thing, the excrements come out through their skin.
Ugh.
Well, you remember a lot of people, when they see grays and stuff, they get a foul smell.
Don't hug an alien.
Yeah, I wouldn't hug an alien. But
get any on you.
So what they had to do is actually learn to develop a paste to keep the alien alive, so they're allowed to ingest this paste. So they're actually these little grays, and these are the grays I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, actually, these little grays, they're developed. They're not born like a human would be. They're a developed type of organism that they are a tool. Except it's a tool that can move around and do whatever you want it to do, kind of a thing.
Well, certainly from what we have seen in imagery or recreations, there is a very ill-defined jaw structure, very small mouth, no evidence of teeth that I can tell. And so that would be indicative of either they have a liquid diet or what you're saying, some kind of an osmosis ingestion. I was just trying to go through my mind. If there's any animal on Earth that is like that eats through its skin. I cannot think of one. Can you?
But plants do.
Right. Yeah, that's true. They take in the water and then they draw in the moisture from the soil, and then you've got photosynthesis.
Right.
So are we speaking here of the possibility of an intelligent plant?
I wouldn't know about an intelligent plant, but could their system be the same way that, remember, if the theory is true, and I'm not saying it is because I don't have any evidence, but if the theory is true, if these things are grown, because remember, all of them look the same. You don't see one with, hey, his eyes are too close this way. You don't see another one with a flat nose, or one with, a different feature, maybe ear is shorter than the other. I mean, like humans, we all look different.
Yeah.
I've never heard anybody say to me in this that, all these aliens look different. They all said, unless it's a different species, like, Palladians or something like that.
Mhm.
But all the grays looked exactly the same. Now, if they were born like we have children,
Mhm.
wouldn't they be different?
Well, you would think.
Right.
Yeah, and there's really no evidence of gender or sex in them, is there? They're just
No.
kind of asexual cookie cutter units, like they've
Right.
been manufactured in a plant or something.
So when I looked at all this, I says the guy is making sense because there's no differentiation in their features.
Mhm.
There's nothing that makes me think that I mean, nobody's ever seen them eat a steak.
Yeah,
And I gotta say this, man, these guys, if you're gonna mutilate a cow, take something from a cow, why wouldn't you take the prime rib? The
exactly.
filet mignons. I mean,
Yeah,
either these guys don't know what the real steak tastes like or whatever, but
yeah.
I wouldn't be eating eyeballs and a cow's ass if I can get prime rib out of the thing.
You haven't had a hot dog lately, have you?
No, no. And I never will after you said that.
Yeah. So I've got these documents in front of me here, Chris, and I just want to go over some of the sightings that are listed in this. There are two sections. There's visual reports, and then there's signal intelligence and sensor type reports. So from CENTCOM, we have a report, and this is from the Immaculate Constellation document. On U.S. government networks, there exists daytime FMV and daytime FLIR. Now, FLIR is, I think, forward-looking infrared. I don't know what FMV is. A formation of 12 metallic orbs skimming the surface at high speed before dispersing in multiple directions. The rapid and agile maneuvering of the metallic orbs were incompatible with known aerospace vehicles and were between 3 to 6 meters in diameter. The opening section of the footage is 12 metallic orbs flying in a tight cuboid formation, and there were 3 vertical square formations of 4 orbs each, arranged in a 3-pronged configuration, creating the illusion of a cube at a distance. All the orbs were white hot against black ocean cold in the FLIR footage, and each sphere created a faint atmospheric distortion both around itself as a heat shimmer contrail. The metallic orbs moved in this cube formation over the ocean for some time before rapidly breaking formation as pairs. The sensor platform lost track of most of the metallic orbs as they ascended in altitude and accelerated in speed, but maintained observed pair metallic orbs formation continuing on the original trajectory of the larger formation. Anything about that stand out to you, Chris?
Yeah, it brings me back to 1947, what we call Foo Fighters
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. We had Foo Fighters back there, except the color was different. I think they in 19 no, it wasn't 1947, but 1944, 1945. They were seeing Foo Fighters. They were green in color. The thing that you're telling about makes me very interesting because years ago they talked about amplifying gravity, where they create a hole, almost like a hole, in front of the craft, and that instead of being pushed, it actually is falling, and it makes and that way it's designed would make the craft go so much faster and be able to make maneuvers that a traditional jet or drone couldn't do at this point. So, with that, we've always thought about plasma energy. I mean, to be able to harness the power of the sun. Now, we know what the theory is. I mean, if you could take hydrogen, separate the hydrogen, turn it into helium-4, I believe. Now you have electromagnetic plasma that is as powerful as the sun, and that's why some people think that these UFOs draw energy from the sun or even water, that they can separate the hydrogen. Lou Elizondo said a long time ago hydrogen played a big key to some of the stuff, and he's never spoken about it since that I know of. But hydrogen seems to be something that they're interested in, because hydrogen is water. We've known that crafts have taken up water and things. And there's been a person by the name of Dave Toon down in Florida who's looked at NASA pictures, and you can actually see crafts, just sucking the hydrogen right from the sun. And so I believe, in my humble opinion, is that hydrogen plays a big part in this, and I think other scientists do. Now, when you say about how this thing is picked up with heat, wouldn't electromagnetic plasma cause a heat? I mean, you're dealing with power of the sun. You're dealing with power that would radiate heat of that nature. So that everything you said kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I was looking here about the distortion around the objects of the atmosphere. It kind of ties into creating a bubble of something around the object.
Remember, Bob Lazar talked about the amplifiers?
Yeah.
The amplifiers would create a bubble around the object, and nobody believed them. But the amplifiers would move it, this way.
Yeah.
Well, what did we see from the videotape of what one of the, F-18 pilots took?
Mhm.
Well, that's exactly what it did. The
Yeah.
saucer went kind of right on its top. There was a ring around it that looked like there was a distortion, right? And when it moved, it would shift, where the bottom would amplify wherever it was. So, yeah, I think you're right on the money with that, Padre. But the biggest question is, and I go back to it, why won't they release something like that? You can think of the things that we could do commercially to help people.
Exactly. We can explore that answer to that question when we return right after this break on UAP Crossfire. Stay with us. Welcome back to UAP Crossfire. Dan Carlson here with Chris DePerno. We're going over some of the sightings that have been reported with the Operation Immaculate Constellation. And before we were going to the break, Chris, you were speaking about the concealment of these videos that supposedly the government has. Do you think we will ever see them released?
No. And here's one of the things that people aren't touching on. So these special access programs, they hide the money. And when they hide the money, you don't know where it is. Now, the Pentagon just went through an audit, right? So now you got billions of dollars. They can't account for 50% of their billions. 50% of their funding is not accounted for. How can a government agency not be able to account for 50% of billions of dollars? So to me, that tells me, because there's been always the old theory that, well, a hammer costs $100, a toilet seat costs $200 and stuff like that. Well, they have to fund these special access programs. I mean, obviously, even if they give something to an airplane company or something like that, they still have to fund that with billions and billions of dollars. But if there's a paper trail, you're going to have a problem trying to explain that to Congress or the Senate. So you don't have a paper trail. But the amazing thing is that with this, that we won't see it is because, if, like anything, humans are humans, and some of them will take some money, some of them will embezzle, fraud, whatever, projects that should never have been started or were just suicidal from the start. Now you have to try to account for that money. Well, you can't account for it. So to me, I think part of the problem is that the secondary questions are going to be, where did all the money go? What did you do with billions of dollars that you don't know where it is? And that's a serious thing, because that's our money. That's your money, Padre, my money. the audience's money that's being spent that way, and it's supposed to be spent for our benefit.
Yep.
And it's not.
Nope.
I mean, how would you feel if, your prices of gas, your prices of heating and everything are skyrocketing, and yet we can pull energy out of the air and give it to everybody for free? Oh, they'll say, well, that'll hurt no, you know what? We have developed inventions all through our history, and we've been doing just fine with it. No, nothing's ever really collapsed.
Yep.
But you have people who said, I'm going to lose billions of dollars. I don't have enough billions. I want more.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's families and stuff that have made a lot of money on our misfortunes.
So I'm going to ask you a non-UAP related question here because you mentioned billionaires. Supposedly, in the new administration coming up in a couple months, we're going to have the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, headed up by a couple of billionaires, Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Are you at all optimistic for any disclosure with a new administration filled with people that seem to be pretty intent on dismantling the current system?
Well, the first thing I would tell both those guys, I think this is a great idea, but I would tell them, go out and buy some bulletproof vests.
Oh,
That's
my.
the very first thing I tell them, because people are going to be coming after you like there's no tomorrow.
Wow. That's sad.
What's that, Padre?
I said that's sad that people who would want to actually do good by rooting out waste would be targeted in that way. Because really, you can't bribe them. They're both billionaires, right? So I suppose you have to find another way to get to them. But let's take a look at
and that's one of the things. And they know how to run a business. They know how to actually take a situation and streamline it and make it more efficient. But you got a lot of people who love the cushy position they're in, and they're not going to give it up that easy.
Well, we'll have to see. I think
if they're able to do what they want to do,
mm-hmm.
I think they will do it. But I got a feeling you got to remember the story about Admiral Wilson.
Refresh our memories.
All right. Well, Admiral Wilson, he had probably one of the highest clearances you can have in the U.S. government. He was director of intelligence, I believe, for the Joint Chief of Staff. He made sure money was appropriated to these secret fundings. And he stumbled on some kind of special access program that he wasn't read into. Now, he's supposed to be read into all these programs because he's the money guy. So he looks at this thing and goes, what's this program? And so he goes, I've never heard of this, never been read into it. So he calls up a private company who has the program, and they say, tough, we're not telling you. Well, wait a minute, I'm an admiral, and I'm the person, and I'm coming right down. So he actually goes down to the company, flies down, drives down, whatever. And they say, hey, Admiral, nice to see you. Geez, you want a cup of coffee? Oh, by the way, we ain't telling you crap. And he goes, crazy. He's not, just saying, listen, I need to be read into this program. No. And so somehow or another, from what the story goes, he was shown who was on this knowledgeable program, who were the people that knew about it. And I don't think there was anybody that was in the government. It was all private corporation people. So and think about this. You can't foil a private corporation.
You're right.
Right. So let's say Boeing, Lockheed, or whatever company has a program they're working on, a special ed program. The government can't say, or you as a private citizen say, hey, I want all the records on this like you can with the government. They can tell you go pound salt. And that's what they told Admiral Wilson. So Admiral Wilson goes back and he gets a phone call saying, if you like your stars on your shoulder and you don't want to retire early and you don't want to see your good career go right down the crapper, stay off of this project.
Oh, boy.
So, I mean, and it was a reverse engineering project from what the story goes. So why do you have this? Well, see, this is the problem. You have a company that now is totally in control of a special access program. So they can go in and say, we need $5 billion, we need $6 billion, or we can't complete this program. Well, the Pentagon or the government, whoever wants the program, say, okay, we got to give it to you because we really want this program. This is going to put us ahead of everybody else. We need to know. We need to get this done. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. Now you say, you need another $6 billion. Well, where does it stop?
Yeah.
I mean, where do you say, hey, wait a minute, you're going to have to come up with some records. You're going to have to show us your progress before we start throwing another $1 billion at this project that we don't know anything about.
I don't like that. Let's put it that way.
Well, I agree with you, Padre, but and like I said before, earlier in the program, David Grush said the most remarkable thing, and nobody is doing a thing about it. And that is that people have been killed over this secret. And if that is true, now, to me, Grush seems like he's a very credible person. The reason I say that is because Carl Knoll, who's an absolute fantastic scientist, he was Grush's boss and said, this guy's right on the money. He knows exactly what he's talking about. By the way, Knoll also turned around and said, these aliens have been here for a long time and they're walking among us. So,
yeah, the Lou Elizondo has spoken highly of Mr. Grush, and ostensibly they worked in some of the same programs. Let's take a look at another one of these sightings that was reported within the text of the Operation Immaculate Constellation. This one is from Northcom. It's titled Jellyfish UAP Crosses U.S.-Mexico Border. It claims that on U.S. government networks, there exists forward-looking infrared footage of an irregularly shaped UAP flying across the southern border. The UAP appeared in FLIR to be mottled irregularly with hot and cold emissions and approximated a jellyfish or floating brain with hanging appendages in appearance. The UAP flew against the wind with no visible means of propulsion, maintained an unnatural rigidity in its movements and flight path, and maintained a comparatively low altitude to geographic features. In appearance and behavior, footage of this UAP violating the airspace of the southern border resembled the same class of UAPs observed near Department of Defense facilities in Iraq and Afghanistan. There exists at least one compilation video of this class of UAP sourced from Department of Defense Force Projection Assets and Theater ISR, I don't know what that is, which uses this footage as a point of comparison. This brings to mind from a few months ago, the footage that was leaked, I think, by George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell of a jellyfish type UAP. And I think that was in Iraq or Afghanistan, was it not?
And it was, but it flew over a military base. And it was picked up by, once again, a FLIR. Here's the problem I have with this jellyfish scenario. Yeah. I'm wondering if it's not because we have had intelligence balloons that pick up electronic signals and stuff, and we've shot one down, obviously, from the Chinese and stuff. So if you have some kind of balloon that has, looks like an octopus, those antennas could be picking up signal intelligence. So that's the only thing that I would say that I think we got to look at that before we could say that's a UFO, is because, we sometimes jump too fast to say, oh my God, we've never seen that before. That's got to be a UFO. I mean, the thing happened in Iraq with that same type of thing. Some people were saying it was something on the lens. Another person said it was a Mylar balloon. Another person said it was a craft. The other person said it went into the water, came out of the water. There's the problem with trying to get a good investigation to see what it is that stories become exaggerated. They expand so much that you really have to try to filter through what the truth is. Now, it could very well have been a UFO. It could very well have been a craft of unknown origin. But it's very hard to pinpoint that, because you will have 6, 7, 10, stories of the same incident, and you have to piecemeal what actually took place so you can say, okay, I got to look at this specific stuff. This here is nonsense. This here is actual facts. And and the thing is, there's never any physical evidence. You get a blurred picture, you have something that you think is there, but it could be something from the camera. This is one of the most difficult investigations that people can do, because you're dealing with something that you can't collect evidence that well with.
Back in the day, I used to fly small airplanes, and you study the configuration of flight and what makes flight. You have lift, and then you have gravity opposing it. You have thrust and drag interacting all on this thing in the air. A thing that interested me about this, that kind of stood out, if this is maintaining a specified altitude above ground level, meaning it's terrain following, that would to me speak against the balloon solution, because balloons generally are going with the wind. This was going against the wind, and once they're set in motion, they just have to follow the wind. They can go up.
And that's not necessarily true, Padre, with the balloon incident that took place with the Chinese balloon. That was actually powered. It actually was able to fly over military installations.
It had steering fans on it, right? It had maneuvering fans or something.
Correct. Correct. There was something that was able to maneuver it, because it wasn't just going by wind power. It was actually being able to hover over or slowly move over installations. So I'm not saying that this is the catch-all to everything. I'm just saying this is one theory, and that there's probably 8, 9 other theories, Padre, that you have to look at.
When you're talking about something that looks like a brain, and it has these things hanging down from it, something to me that kind of speaks like you against UAP, just from, again, an aeronautic standpoint. If you look at an aircraft, every piece on that aircraft has a function, and it is there for a purpose. You want the airflow to be as clean as possible. But if you have like things, they call it appendages or tentacles, of varying lengths hanging down, even there, if it's radio transmission equipment, that's not the way antennas would be configured. It's too messy to me to be something that is a functional craft, more like, as you're pointing out, something that's broken away from a mooring and is carrying its attachment cords or whatever with it.
Yeah, I see. And the thing is, Padre, you might be right on the button with it, because one, I'm not an aeronautical engineer, nor am I a pilot. So I would be talking out of turn to try to explain, certain things of that nature, and I won't do that. But your theory might be the exact one that's there. The problem is, when you go to the witnesses, they have so many different stories that when you try to gel it into one story, it becomes very difficult, and yes, we've had FLIR pictures, we've had sightings, we have everything else, but some people say, no, that thing never went into the water. Where did that come from? Another person who's credible says, no, it went into the water, came out. So, now you're talking, this person's credible, that person's credible. So who do you call the liar?
Several years ago, personal story here. I'm a hunter. I hunt only for meat. Don't worry. I like to eat game that I get. And
Good
I
for
was
you.
hunting wild boar down in Southwest Texas, 12 miles from the Rio Grande. Heavy area, as you know, of traffic across the border. Border Patrol, heavy presence. And I'm sitting there in my blind and, waiting for an animal to come by. And you know how sometimes you're out and you sense something, but you
Mhm.
don't hear something? And I'm looking around, it's like that feeling you're being watched. And I looked up, and here was this blimp with little engines on it, white in color. It was a Border Patrol surveillance craft that was flying over the area. And I'm saying to myself, obviously, because it's right there, and I can see, the markings on it, U.S. What a Border Patrol or whatever it was, I forget. And so I know it's not a UAP, but it's quiet, and you hear that a lot about UFOs. I mean, I wouldn't have known it was there unless it was, right next to because the engines were so quiet on it, and it had, some things below it, but they were readily identified by me as a sensor suite, and it just kind of takes a look at me, wanted to see what I was, and then just kind of goes on its way. So there's stuff that is flying around the border being used for purposes such as that.
Sure.
And with the money the cartels have these days, God only knows what they have as
Oh,
far
yeah.
as technology and drone craft that could be flying over the border.
Sure. And I would imagine they got probably good technology because the Chinese and the Venezuelans and everybody else under the sun, the Iranians are all giving it to them. So, I mean, and that's the difficult part about ufology is because we develop technology all the time that's so advanced that when we see something in the sky that we just haven't seen before,
Mhm,
we have to say that's a UFO. And
mhm,
of course, sometimes the government will make it sound like, well, we're not going to talk to you about it, simply because it may be a experimental plane. As you know, they try to see people's reactions or try to see how bad they've been discovered when people do witness, an experimental craft or new technology.
mhm.
Um, and then they'll put out empty information. I mean, there was a person who they actually, not physically, but mentally tortured, and it's
Mm.
all been proven that he was on the verge of suicide. I mean, they kept feeding him information that, he was being visited by aliens and
Mm.
he was seeing these crafts and everything. And it was experimental engineering that the U.S. government was, but they didn't want him to be credible about what he saw. So they drove him nuts.
I live not very far from Ellsworth Air Force Base. It's one of our foremost defensive assets in the U.S., soon to be home of the B-21 bomber, the new one that's going to be
You
coming. Um, there's a woman in this area who just this week sent me some photos. I don't have permission to show them to you yet, but I will talk to her about that, of things that she's been seeing in the sky around here lately. And from what I can look at in the photographs, to me, it looks like the standard triangular configuration that we're hearing
Mhm.
about so many UAPs. Now, I'm kind of with Commander Cobra on this in that I tend to think that the triangular, the smaller ones are ours. That it's
Yeah.
some type of a new flight technology. We can't forget that the F-117 that had actually been operational for many years before it was even acknowledged in its existence. So I'm pretty sure that the Air Force probably has some craft out there. But it's interesting the various shapes of these UAPs, from jellyfish to triangle to sphere, and in operation. Immaculate Constellation, they broke these down into 6 basic kinds of UAP. And as a veteran investigator yourself, Chris, let me know what you think of these classification. There's the sphere or the orb,
Hmm.
the disc or the saucer, the oval or tic tac, the triangle, the boomerang or arrowhead, which was new to me, and then something new they're calling the irregular or organic type of UAP, such as the floating brain jellyfish and some shape-shifting UAPs. Comments on those classifications and input on them.
Well, let's take one at a time. Let's take the boomerang.
Okay.
So we know the boomerang design was first done by Germany with the Horten brothers that started with that. So the Horten brothers actually designed a fixed wing aircraft. It was all one. It was a remarkable piece of aerodynamic thing. So when they saw it in the sky, they said, "Oh my God, could that? Nobody's ever seen anything like that before." So they didn't have a tail, didn't have anything that would look like a normal plane. So you had the Horten brothers developing that. So then all of a sudden, here comes Kenneth Arnold. And what does he describe? Sort of like boomerang style crafts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that leads me to believe, well, maybe they said that that was a UFO because maybe we have redeveloped, the craft. Remember, we took all the Nazi technology. And at the time, Colonel Rupert had said that he looked at the technology and says, this is unbelievable technology, and one would think that some of the stuff that is flying would be considered a UFO because that technology was so advanced. So now you have the boomerang that people see that could have been reverse engineered, and we're doing it. If you start seeing our generational planes, they're slowly getting to that type of design, but we probably have it. But like you said, certain planes have been flying for years, and then when they're about to be mothballed, then they say, "Oh yeah, by the way, we have this. It's been around for 20 years."
Well, the B2 is that flying ring configuration, and we've seen them here in western South Dakota. The new B-21 is a flying wing configuration. It's ostensibly for the stealth characteristics of that design.
Sure.
Now, the arrowhead, I'm trying to wrap my mind around what is the difference between the arrowhead and the triangular.
Now, that actually, the arrowhead might be actually a extraterrestrial, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
If you look at a painting that was done years and years and years ago, Bob Spring showed me this. It shows like there's a big battle up in the sky. Yep. And in the middle of the painting shows something that you just described, like an arrowhead. But Commander Cobra said, hey, look, that's similar to the wing part of what goes up and down the flaps or whatever they're called and stuff like that.
The aileron, yeah.
Yeah. And so we looked at that and said, holy cow, perhaps that was something that was made years ago by extraterrestrials and is now still being seen. Because if you look at this painting, it's exactly what you described, Padre. It was one of those things where you go, holy cow. I mean, where did they ever come up with a sighting like this?
The Germans actually had an Arrowhead aircraft under development. There's a mock-up of it in the, I saw at the Virginia Aviation Museum outside of Virginia Beach. They have a number of old World War II and World War I aircraft restored to flying ability. And they had a hangar that had some life-size mock-ups of these. So if you could envision a broadhead arrowhead with if you're looking straight on it, you've got the two downward, Battlestar Galactica Colonial Viper fighter craft.
Right, exactly.
Okay. That's what we're talking about, something like that.
And the probability is that if the Germans were absolutely amazing, and they were led by a madman, absolutely madman.
Yeah.
But the scientists, even before Hitler, were brilliant. They took science and said, we're going to throw that science out. Here's what we're going to bring in: string theory, different types of propulsion system, anti-gravity, zero energy. They were all working on this stuff, talking about space travel back in 1939.
Yep.
You know, and they were talking about it back even before that. You know, Herman Oss developed books about how we would conquer space, how we would do it. And here's the amazing thing: Herman Oss, he said, and because everybody said, "Oh, Werner von Braun said it." No, Werner von Braun got it from his teacher, Herman Oss. Herman Oss said, "You know, we had help with this." And Werner von Braun said the same thing. We had help developing these projects.
From whom?
Well, that's the $1 million question. From who?
Well, we know that Hitler himself and his inner circle were heavily into the paranormal and the occult.
Oh God, yes.
And well, not God, but the other side.
Yeah.
And you know, who knows? The Book of Enoch speaks of fallen angels or demons influencing the development of humans. You know, if Don were here, we'd hear about the Anunnaki and so forth and their influence there. The Bible is full of stories of supernatural beings interacting with humanity. Sure. And the only thing that argues against that in my mind is if the Nazis had this supernatural ally, why did they lose? Unless the supernatural ally on our side was superior. That's all I can point to.
Well, let me throw it, because I have no proof of this, but this is just a theory. Mm-hmm. So people have come to me and says, "Oh, Chris, if it's spiritual, why would they come as aliens? You know, demons don't use flying saucers." Yeah, you're right. But if I wanted to deceive you and I came as a demon, you would fight against me.
Bullseye.
But if I came as an extraterrestrial from another planet and I came with a ship and at first showed you friendship, mm-hmm. Oh, look, we're brothers in arms and stuff. So
you and I are tracking on the same tracks, brother.
Right. So the best way to deceive a person is to befriend the person. Yep. Does that make sense?
Yep. We come in peace. And then it's a cookbook, right?
my old sergeant used to, yeah, my old sergeant used to say, "Chris, if they show you the left hand, watch the right hand."
Exactly.
Because that's exactly where the problem's going to come from. So, and that's no different. I mean, look, all through history, we have found our species to be a warlike species.
Yep.
I mean, even now today with modern technology, and we know that we can destroy the planet, they still want to toy with it.
Yep.
You know, nobody is saying, "Hey, listen, guys, this is crazy fighting over a piece of land." And now we really are right now, as you and I are talking. This isn't past tense. Russia's throwing intercontinental ballistic missiles at Ukraine. Yep. Ukraine is shooting American missiles. Yep. I mean, these guys are now, you know, on the brink of really World War III. And it's not impossible right now for a tactical. Some people say, "Oh, Putin will never do it." You know, you put a guy in a corner too many times, he'll say, "I got nothing to lose here."
Yep, he's running out of options.
Right.
So let me ask you this, because you've investigated, you know, as part of MUFON, so many cases. This that I have in front of me here a series of tables about these shapes of UAP and mm-hmm. things that they have categorized around them. For instance, the sphere or the orb. Here's what it says. In size, these range from small objects to those several meters in diameter. In speed, they are capable of stationary hovering, rapid acceleration, speeds surpassing that of conventional aircraft. Signatures. These often lack conventional signatures such as heat trails. Electromagnetic effects on military electronics have been reported. And this is from the sphere. So they're reporting electrical interference on military equipment. It talks about the different colors they come in mm-hmm. and the surface details of the craft from completely smooth and reflective to having visible protuberances, appendages, concavities, and openings. In behavior, the sphere or orb is highly maneuverable, including abrupt direction changes, the ability to hover, often observed to fly in complex geometric formations and operate in pairs. Atmospheric phenomena, occasional disturbances in cloud formations, and heat wave contrails have been reported. Biological effects. Close observers of orbs and spheres report feelings of unease and of electronic device malfunctions. How does this compare to what your experience is?
I've never heard of I've heard of not physical injuries, but flu-like symptoms after they've gotten too close to them. They don't have to touch them, but I know that there were a couple of women who said we saw an orb that probably around treetop level. It was pretty close to us, and then they developed some flu-like symptoms for a couple of weeks. And so that's not uncommon for people to feel a sickness as some of the orbs are getting close to that thing. I've never heard of somebody being physically injured. However, and I'm going to say that I'm wrong on that in some part, because Bob Spearing talks about an orb that destroyed a village back in the 70s. And yeah, he explained how this orb came down, made a pass in the middle of this small primitive town, and turned around and came back, and it just, things were falling and everything else because of what it was emitting. So, but a lot of people think that orbs, they kind of got the theory that these are scout ships. And one of the reasons they think they're scout ships is because there's always seems to be a mother craft sometimes around. And people have seen these things coming out of a mother craft and going back into a mother craft. And it wouldn't surprise me, because if you're wanting to collect information, why would you want a big mother craft when you can send out scout ships all over the place, collect intelligence, and then, remember, if they've been here for a while, they're still collecting information on us. And, the thing is, we should be open about researching them as much as they're pretty open about. Look, they're not making any bones about being here. You see the crafts in the sky. People report seeing aliens. There's all kinds of, witness testimony. There's no physical evidence, but there's all kinds of witness evidence. So obviously they're not really trying to hide it.
Right.
They're just trying to keep away from us.
Yep.
For whatever reason, but they're not trying to hide it. So we should be out in the open saying, look, you're researching us. We're going to start researching you. Yeah. And that's only done by private corporations, and the one government entity, whether you want to call it Arrow or this name or Immaculate Constellation, whatever it is, needs to be more open. Here's the thing that bothers me, though, Padre. Let's say that, and I have no proof of this, I can't say it, but this theory's always been hanging around. So they've been here for a long time, and we know it and stuff. Suppose our government made a deal with them. Suppose there really was a deal made by Eisenhower that if we get your technology, you could start kidnapping people. That's the most heinous thing you could do. How dare you? How dare you make a deal to kidnap, my children, my father, my mother, and do experiments on them without permission? Look, I can guarantee you, if the aliens came down and said, hey, we need your DNA and stuff for us to survive, there'd be a line all the way across New York to give it to them. I gave DNA to the aliens. But to go into somebody's house at 2:00 in the morning, frighten them to the point where, they have trauma for the rest of their lives that nobody really believes. I mean, you tell these stories, and of course there's a few that will believe you, but the majority of people say, wow, what a whack, and stuff. So how dare our own U.S. government, if they did this, I'm not saying they did, so I can't accuse them, but if they did, I mean, how do you explain that to people? How do you say, yeah, we made a deal because we wanted to get this technology, so we sacrifice? Now, the one thing that makes me very worried is because the U.S. government has done things without telling us and have experimented on people without telling us and their own stuff, not with extraterrestrials.
Right. I mean, what about those experiments that were sadly conducted on black men in the South with venereal disease and so forth?
Sure.
Just horrific
Horrible.
violation of,
Right.
and
But we have through the years experimented on people without their knowledge. How about the servicemen that were exposed to radiation
yes.
without them knowing?
Yep. Yeah.
You know, and they died, and we're the cause of it. But you know, why would you want to do that? Why do you want to do that? What, to weaponize this and see how many people we can kill if we set it off? Come on, give me a break.
Yeah.
You know,
let's look at some of these other shapes and what this report says about them and see what your experience tells you. Let us talk about the triangles, because we both have kind of our own opinions on that. These are medium to large size, ranging from F-16 size to football field size, capable of slow, precise movement as well as rapid acceleration to speeds beyond conventional aircraft. Often reported to emit a soft humming sound and may affect electronic devices within a certain proximity. Their colors are black or gray, sometimes with lights at the corner. Some have been described as having visible surface textures like panels or ridges, and occasionally stabilizers. Hovering is common, as is silent flight. The ability to suddenly vanish or accelerate rapidly is frequently reported. Triangular UAPs often emit a focused beam of light. Toroidal light patterns are sometimes observed to emanate from a central point, leading to rapid acceleration or disappearance. Those encountering them report long-term psychological effects such as anxiety or insomnia, alongside the feeling of being watched or shared awareness with a triangle UAP. Thoughts, Chris?
all right. So I had a good friend that was a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. He was the head of the Army's Future Weapons Lab. And so we talked about this subject, and he explained to me, he says, Chris, the triangles, he says, the ones with the lights at the bottom are ours. The ones with the lights at the tips are theirs.
Really?
It's exactly what he said. He goes, and obviously we've had project names like Manta, Aurora, that we've seen, you know, countless sightings of this. Actually, there was one picture that was in the U.S. Military Times that had 3 of them in maneuver position. I was like, you know, they're flying almost like you would see Super Hornets fly, you know, in formation type of deal. So, you know, that tends me to believe, I think you're on the right track, that, you know, some of these are ours, but we have to get the technology from somewhere. And I think the technology is one of that. You remember, we look at how we develop technology over there. It's like cars. We started with these buggies, the Model T Ford, and now we got electric cars, a Tesla, and this and that. Well, what makes you think the aliens don't upgrade their technology? You know, maybe they had this type of spacecraft, and then they developed this, and then this. We don't take account for that. So when we see something in the sky, you know, we have to take account that it might not be ours, but they have maybe newer technology too.
That's a good point. You look at the ancient drawings. I've seen some like from India, and you know, it's the arrowhead with basically a goldfish bowl on it, something like that. And then we get into orbs and spheres and such. I was intrigued by the mention of long-term psychological effects with triangles, such as anxiety or insomnia, along with a feeling of being watched, which I believe is paranoia, is it not? You know, what would it be about a craft that would lead to lingering trauma of that type, do you suppose?
I would have to say that in those cases, I would start investigating if they had missing time with it.
Oh, good point.
Because if they had missing time, then you start going down the road of an abduction.
Mhm. Yep.
So you have to ask the witness, okay, you're feeling this way. When you saw the craft,
Mhm.
how long did you see the craft? And then kind of ask them, how long were you in that area? And if the things don't match up, were you wearing a watch? What did your watch say before the craft? What did the watch say after you saw the craft? Now, there's a new theory out there called suspended time. And this is something that's new and needs to be looked at. So instead of missing time, and this happened to one of the pilots that was chasing one of these crafts.
Mhm.
And when he was close enough to this object,
Mhm.
he thought he was just with the object for 5 minutes. And everything about him said it was a very short period of time. However, the radar people, the people who were monitoring this, no, you were up there over 20 minutes. So somehow there's a suspension of time that is now developed with people. People didn't realize it before because they say, well, no, I was there, but they're not looking at how long they were there. They say, well, it was just a short period of time, but they could have actually been there so much longer of the suspension of time. It means that you're not losing consciousness. You're not blanking out. You're not missing that time. It's that time in your mind shortens, and then that way, whatever is happening takes place in their time. They can distort time. Everybody has always said that time has always been distorted
Mhm.
when they get too close to these things.
Let's take a look here at the irregular and organic table and what it because uh, before I went into ministry full time, I was a meteorologist, broadcast meteor and corporate meteorologist, and this one seems to affect the weather, and that intrigues me. So, what they report with these irregular, or as they call organic UAPs, they are highly variable from small, compact forms to larger, more sprawling structures. Movements range from slow drifting to rapid acceleration, often unpredictable. Their signatures. Some reports include unusual sounds or the absence of expected aerodynamic noise. Electromagnetic effects are common, which is interesting, often described with bioluminescent qualities or shifting colors, particularly for the floating brain or jellyfish types. Of course, those are the bioluminescent is characteristic of a jellyfish. There are
Right.
species that do that. Surface details. Descriptions vary widely from smooth, fluid like surfaces to complex, articulated structures. In behavior, they demonstrate a wide range of behaviors from controlled maneuvering to erratic patterns of movement. Shifting abilities have been reported. Biological effects. Observations include physical sensations of warmth or cold, unexplained smells, including an ozone smell, and psychological distress. Unique emissions. The floating brain jellyfish UAPs occasionally exhibit patterned luminescence or fluctuating lights and colors, typically only visible in the higher end of the electromagnetic spectrum. Atmospheric phenomena has been observed, including sudden drops of temperature and the appearance of clouds have been reported. What do you make of that, Chris?
I'm totally baffled, and I'll tell you the reason why is because we we don't really know how many species are actually visiting us.
Mhm,
When new species that visit us comes new technology.
mhm,
So when we look at an object in the sky, as you just described,
mhm.
is that a new species that's looking at us?
Yep.
I mean, to me, I have never been able to get a good case of a jellyfish or something that I could really look at a pattern and stuff. But they're becoming more and more common. Remember everybody saw the flying disc, right?
Mhm.
Years ago, it was the flying disc, the flying disc. Then all of a sudden, people started seeing triangles and rectangles, and now cubes and orbs, and now jellyfish.
Mhm.
So, does it mean their technology is changing, or is there new species that are coming to this planet to check us out?
Well, let's check out the meteorological aspects of this for a moment, because there's a lot of atmospheric physics involved in a temperature drop. First, most humans cannot detect a variation of temperature until it reaches 2 degrees Fahrenheit.
No, okay.
Now, when my wife and I are arguing about the thermostat, a case could be made. But anyway, that's the general rule. 2 degrees is the borderline at which we detect a temperature. So if people are experiencing a temperature drop, they're experiencing a drop of more than 2 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, they're some distance away from the object, which means that if they're observing a sharp temperature drop there, it's reasonable to assume it's going to be colder the closer you get to the object. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but
Yeah,
is that
there's a
always the
cold
fact?
front. Yeah, and it says that they've been observed with a sudden appearance of clouds. Well, these two things are consistent, because if you lower the temperature and that temperature lowering reaches the dew point temperature of the air around the object, a cloud is going to form around the object. It's forming its own cloud bank, if you will.
Now,
And
when you say that, Padre,
Mhm.
do you think that that's done to camouflage the object?
That could be one reason, but I'm looking at the amount of energy required to do this, because to lower the temperature
Hmm.
in a portion of the atmosphere that much. I mean, you look at the size of the air conditioning unit that cools your home, and it's probably what, 3 feet by 2 feet, and there's a condensation process that's going on there. And what this thing would have to have is some type of a technology that causes the air around it to form condensation. But when you form condensation, I mean, what is a cloud? Cloud is visible water vapor. So now, if this thing is inside a cloud, it's going to be covered in water droplets. If you're in an aircraft and it flies through a cloud, you'll notice water droplets
What?
forming on the windows and
Right.
streak by. So there are pros and cons here. Once you add water to something, you increase its weight. That, of course, can manifest itself if it gets too cold as icing, which affects the flight characteristics of the craft. I'm trying to understand what would be the benefit of lowering the temperature other than what you've said, possible camouflage, but there are side effects to that as well, because as soon as you move out of that cloud. You see,
Yeah, but do they constantly create a cloud? I
well,
mean, I'm looking at some sci-fi movies, and you could see like Independence Day or whatever, the cloud is formed around it, and then it
right,
comes out of the cloud, kind of a
right.
deal.
Yeah,
But
but
I
what would
mean,
happen? It would leave a contrail. So, I mean, what you're seeing, as these planes go through the high sky, they're ejecting water vapor out the back into cold air, which is
right.
immediately turning into ice crystals and creating that contrail that you see going behind the aircraft. If this thing was causing condensation of the air around it, it started to move, it it'd have a cloud sticking out behind it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But the problem is, we don't exactly know why it's doing it,
Exactly. Why?
and and stuff. I mean, are they doing weather manipulation? Well, maybe, but what's the benefit for them to do that?
The sensation of warmth or cold with these has been reported in under biological effects. Okay, what's
Well,
what's
I would love to see one of those come to Buffalo and stick around during the winter time because, especially if they can create warmth, baby,
yeah.
they can come all they want, you know.
Well, we've only got about 5 minutes left, but I want to share a sighting that to me stood out as the most alarming to me. The F-22 Raptor is the premier dogfighting fighter craft in the world right now. Everyone else is trying to copy it. People say, what about the F-35? It's a different animal with a different purpose.
Right.
So there's an encounter between our top of the line fighter aircraft and orbs. Let me read it to you. While performing a routine airspace surveillance and control mission in the Eastern Air Defense Sector, an F-22 fighter observed multiple UAP contacts at mission altitude. Moving to intercept, the F-22 pilot noted multiple metallic orbs slightly smaller than a sedan, hovering in place. Upon vectoring toward the UAPs, a smaller formation of the metallic orbs accelerated at rapid speed toward the F-22, which was unable to establish radar locks on the presumed hostile UAPs. The F-22 broke trajectory and attempted to evade, but was intercepted and boxed in by approximately 3 to 6 UAPs. One UAP maneuvered in proximity of less than 12 meters to the area directly starboard of the cockpit. And there the UAP established a rigid spatial relationship with the F-22, maintaining its exact position and orientation parallel with the F-22's cockpit, despite multiple evasive rolls and maneuvers. Surrounded by the presumed hostile UAPs, the F-22 was forced out of the mission area under the escort of the UAP formation. That's incredible.
It's very incredible, you know, but I think that's happened more than once. Remember there was an incident over Washington, over the White House. They scrambled jets there. They were going to shoot them down, but they said no. But I think one of the pilots actually had that, and I think they actually made a television show about with the one over Washington called Project Blue Book. In the second season, exactly what you described they took it from what happened in Washington, D.C., when they had fighter jets actually going after these orbs, and the orb just hovered in front of the cockpit. No matter what the pilot did, right, the orb stayed right in place.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that has happened with pilots before. The thing that worries me about what you were saying with the fifth generation and stuff, we haven't seen any hostile actions yet from them. We've tried to engage in hostile actions, but but that just tells me that they have technology so advanced that if we were to get into it with them, we'd definitely have problems.
Absolutely. I mean, you're talking about the F-22, and if you've ever seen one of them maneuver, the kind of maneuvers that they're capable of, and this thing is maintaining a precise position with that means that whoever is controlling that UAP has to have the ability to anticipate that fighter pilot's move. And I've got no clue as to, it's almost would have to be a mind reading technology.
Well, you remember what Commander Fravor said. You know, when an aircraft carrier task force goes out, they send planes into areas called CAP, combat area patrols.
Yeah.
These objects were waiting for them in their combat. No, those are top secret.
Yeah.
Nobody knows except the pilot, and the radar operator and stuff where those are supposed to be. These guys were already there when their Hornets went up. So I mean, I truly believe that they either know the future or they can read our minds.
Well, with that, we are out of time, Chris. The time has flown by. I thank
Just
you.
like that.
Yeah, just like that. We want to thank everybody for joining us. As Commander Cobra says, the best audience on the planet And we hope that you'll tune in next week at the same time for more of UAP Crossfire.